Bill Maher is back on the air. Real Time with Bill Maher is back.
Thank God.
And yeah, thank God. Thank God they ended the writer's strike, because I don't know what I was going to do with myself if Bill Maher wasn't back on the air. But it's certainly a boon to this show because we get to take the piss out of segments like this. So this entire panel discussion could have been fodder for an entire show. But here is Bill Maher's panel with former Bernie Sanders foreign policy advisor, Matt Duss, and I forget the guy's first name. Is it James Kirchick, the tablet magazine editor? The guy with the ears? Yeah, I think his first name is James. It flew out of my mind. I had it here, but I lost it. But here's Bill Maher responding to the Israel-Palestine war. He, of course, said at the beginning that Israel has the moral high ground and that they shouldn't lose it by being too draconian in their response. But as is very often with the case on Bill Maher's show, a lot of debates surrounding Middle East issues always come down to, in his mind, a litigation of the merits of Middle Eastern and Islamic values. And so here is Bill Maher ending on this point, which he has made so many times in the past, but in this context rings a bit different. Let's take a listen.
I just want to finish with the values first, because it's just amazing to me that the American left, so much of it, throws their lot in with people whose values I hope they don't share, but let's go through them. Because values and customs make a difference, okay? And the people of Gaza, who, by the way, if the Israelis did get rid of Hamas, they'd be doing a giant favor to the people of Gaza who hate Hamas too. But let's just go through the lists.
You know, it would really be great if they could get rid of Hamas without killing, hundreds and thousands of children. That would be great if they actually cared to target who they said that they were targeting. That would be a start, wouldn't it? Right?
Well, it would also be a start if you let them out of prison.
Right.
And let them fish their own waters and have an airport. And then they might not elect, and they did elect people like Hamas. It might also be a start if Israel, in some kind of a half-ass Machiavellian maneuver, didn't fund Hamas in order to weaken the PLO and in order to create discord among Palestinians in order to avoid the kind of unity that might have led to the state that they claim they would like to see as a solution.
No, that's a great point. I mean, we have a real great brainstorm going here. But let's get back to Bill, because he makes the big bucks for a reason, I assume.
That's not a valid assumption.
Yeah. Look like us in most ways, values-wise. Maybe we're not doing it the right way. I don't know. Religious tolerance.
I mean, that I agree with you, but it doesn't mean what you think it means, Bill.
Religious tolerance. I love this. So he starts out, these are the values of Israel.
I don't know. Religious tolerance. That doesn't exist in Gaza. You're either Muslim or an infidel. And
I'm sorry, does it exist in Israel? Israel is a Jewish state.
It's a Jewish state
definition. Right. Netanyahu is on record saying very loudly and proudly, Israel is not the home to all people. It is home to the Jewish people. That's a very large part of why you have this problem right now. So is there religious tolerance in Israel?
Not only that, and we're going to get into this, but I have to push back a little bit on that too. What the fuck does Bill Maher know about what the attitudes about religion are within Gaza? Because my experience with Muslims is their views can be very complicated about this, because they see Jews, maybe not the Jews that lock them in prison, but generally Muslims see Jews and Christians as people of the book, right? You're all under that. And particularly with Jews, because they have the same dietary laws, generally, Muslims find marrying Jews acceptable, whereas they wouldn't with Christians because they don't keep kosher. They don't keep halal, right? So the views of Muslims on other religions are more complicated than he's making it out here. I can't speak to Gaza specifically, but the idea that all Muslims hate all of the non-Muslims, that's a gross oversimplification.
Yep, here we go.
Better be a Muslim. Female freedom, free and fair elections, free speech, gay rights. I see these Queers for Palestine.
Did you hear their sister organization, Blacks for the KKK?
How hilarious.
Good one.
I'm a gay man. I've lived in Berlin. This is a level of masochism that even I cannot comprehend.
Right.
We'll let this play out.
You know what? I'm going to just... can I just finish my list? Equality of the sexes. I'll categorize that under don't make me fucking laugh. The fact that, you know, these people think that this is where they should be aligned with, that these are the values that you support?
I think this past week has been a real important moment for a moral reckoning on the American left. Because there is a small, and I'm going to emphasize that, a very small, but growing and extremely loud faction on the American left that has revealed itself.
I don't know how
to
small
be
anymore.
Okay, well, I mean...
It was all over.
Okay. So this is just absolutely disgusting. Not disgusting because their points, broadly speaking, about the views and opinions that are prevalent in the Muslim world are necessarily wrong. He had that big throwdown when Sam Harris was on the show, Ben Affleck versus Sam Harris, where they talked about how a lot of views and opinions that are prevalent in the Muslim world and amongst Muslims in the Western world as well are incompatible with Western liberal values. They cited the poll, 78% of British Muslims wanted the Danish cartoonist, I forget his name, who drew a cartoon of the Prophet. They wanted him arrested. Those were 78% of British Muslims. So they are not incorrect to say that many Muslim values that are widely held and widely espoused by Muslim people are incompatible with Western values. And those points are perhaps relevant if you are discussing issues of immigration, education, women's rights, gay rights, right? If you want to say we have country A and country B, how much should we allow the views and opinions of country B to influence the already existing country A? Okay, that's a legitimate conversation. However, that's not the conversation we're having. The conversation we're having now is, does country A have the right to imprison, subjugate, and eventually genocide country B? And ought they use as justification for the awful and inhuman treatment of country B, must they or should they cite as justification for that, well, they don't share our values, so why would you speak up for them? The fact that Islamic values may be incompatible with many Western liberal values does not give Western governments the right to crush Islamic societies. It does not. And so to sort of merge those two conversations into one for the purpose of excusing genocide, which is what Bill Maher is doing right there, is absolutely vile and sick and disgusting. And yes, racist. This makes me sympathize with what Ben Affleck was saying to Sam Harris. That conversation was, I think, almost 10 years ago. At the time, I thought Ben Affleck was wrong, and he still is technically wrong. He's technically wrong because he was trying to just, you know, completely deny the reality that a lot of Muslim values are incompatible with Western liberal values. He was wrong, but he was not. He obviously was onto something when he smelled that these arguments are being used in order to excuse the mistreatment of Muslim peoples around the world. And mistreatment, obviously, I'm a little embarrassed to have put it so mildly, because obviously mistreatment does not even begin to describe the crimes of the West against the Muslim world historically, and especially now when we are amidst an actual genocide, a world historic human atrocity.
All right, so this is something I think as we get into this debate, and you can see what lengths they're going to go to try to crush and delegitimize all criticism of Israel and what it's doing. You cannot get drawn into trying to argue that what Bill Maher is describing about the Muslim world is not true. It is this. I didn't use this clip when I showed the montage from the Palestine demonstration, but at one point the Israeli women said similarly, we saw a flag for the gay rights, and and free Palestine, and that doesn't exist there. And they're right. They're right. They're not incorrect there. But so I know that a lot of the left, particularly on college campuses, as Maher gets into, they've been bred with this idea of intersectionality, where they're trying to reconcile different struggles and different movements as all one unified movement against Western hegemony. And that's a gross oversimplification. No, the struggles of all peoples are not compatible. Some people who are marginalized hate other people who are marginalized. So yes, is queers for Palestine. Now that's not unintelligible. I think that's very noble if you understand that that sentiment is not returned amongst most of those people. So when the left starts trying to get into painting this fantasy world where no, what do you mean? That's just racism. No, it's not true. And I had Keaton. I don't want to litigate the views of the Muslim world. That's not what this segment is about. But if anyone doubts what we're saying or is skeptical of what we're saying, Pew did a poll of the Muslim world where, yeah, I mean, in most parts of the Muslim world, the majority supported Sharia. The majority are against gay rights. Certainly the majority are against abortion rights. The majority are against women's rights. Not a slim majority, not so vast 80, 90 percentile majorities. And I have in other episodes of the show, we have talked about this, about the implications of mass immigration of people who have values that are that incompatible with values that I think most people on the left hold dear and consider some of the better elements of our society, some of the better ideas that we have generated in the West, like freedom of speech. I worked for many years with Muslims, and I had a lot of debates with them. They were mostly from Turkey, which is the most Western of Muslim countries, and they didn't believe you should be able to draw a picture of Muhammad. They didn't believe you should be able to insult Muhammad. And I would tell them, well, then you don't believe in freedom of speech. And because they saw themselves as having more Western values and had actually a certain disdain for the rest of the Muslim world, they saw themselves kind of as more sophisticated. They would argue, no, we do believe in freedom of speech, but you can't insult the Prophet Muhammad. And it would become this circular argument. Well, then you don't believe in freedom of speech. No, we do. But and it would just go around like that. So by the same token, I found Muslim people that I dealt with to be some of the most hospitable, moral, decent people I've ever dealt with. Like the kind of people you could leave a bag of money on the table and you know it's going to be there when you get back. Like they had very strong values. But they did have certain views on religion, on speech, on women, on gay rights that, no, I was not comfortable with. And I think most people on the left would not be comfortable with. And you can't get drawn into arguing otherwise because that invalidates you. Because it's going to be very easy when you're debating people like Bill Maher for them to make you look foolish if you try to argue otherwise, because they're in the right there. The point is, and that is, as Keaton says, that's relevant when you're talking about immigration. When you're talking about, do you want enough Muslims in your community who have views like this to be able to swing an election? Do you want that? Have you thought through the implications of that? That is a completely separate conversation, and you cannot allow them to make that the same conversation. Once you make that the same conversation, you lose. You have to predicate it on, even if all of that is true, that's not your country, that's not your culture. And if it's not your country, if you're not talking about this in terms of immigration, in terms of your own country, it's really not your business how other people want to conduct their society and their culture. What we're doing so well We have a crisis of loneliness, isolation, suicide, drug addiction. We're in a position to evaluate other people's values and the way that they navigate the world. That's none of our business. And it's certainly not a justification for a genocide. And you cannot allow them to draw us into debating it on those terms, whether we agree with the values and all of the views of the Muslim world. It has absolutely nothing to do with the conversation.
Yeah, because that's exactly the point he's making. Well, they don't believe in women's rights or freedom of speech.
Right.
And so why would the left throw their lot in with them? I forget exactly the wording. I got rid of the video or I'd replay it. Why would they rally to their defense when they don't share our values? Well, we would rally to their defense because they're fucking human beings who are being slaughtered. That's why.
Right.
That's fucking why.
And that's the left. That's what the left is supposed to be.
It's so fucking.
That's what the left is supposed to stand for. They don't have to agree with you for you to value their lives.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. They're being annihilated. That's why you stand with them, because they're being annihilated, because they were locked in a concentration camp and now they're being annihilated. That's it. The conversation ends there. I mean, the chauvinism of, well, I don't see why would the left queers for Palestine? Huh, that's like blacks for the KKK. Morons in the audience.
Well, I want to make one last thing clear in my observations, my own experience, because I don't want to be misunderstood on this. It's very important because I know that we're going to be. Unfortunately, this is going to be an issue for a very long time. What's going on in Israel now? Most of the Muslims that I knew, that I've dealt with, that I've spoken to about politics, respect the idea of plurality. Most of them do not want to impose their values on other Americans.
Right.
But they don't want other Americans imposing their values on them either. That's why, for example, in Canada, they started protesting the way that they're teaching transgenderism in the classes, because they don't want that imposed on their kids. But at the same time, most of the Muslims I know don't want they like the fact that in America you can be who you want to be. Like, most Muslims just want to be left alone to live the way they want to live according to their values. I'm not saying most Muslims who come here want to change the country into a Muslim country. I'm not suggesting that.
Please clap.